episode 53.
Yep. And I think it's going to be another short one, based on
I
what we got
I
so
think
far.
so. Exactly, that's right. Yeah, I've actually been doing all sorts of physical stuff today. I'm a bit tired actually,
Hmm.
I think I've only got a few items on the list. One small point though, I think a previous episode, my camera angle was a bit funny, and I was sitting a bit low, so I adjusted the
Was it?
camera. So hopefully that looks better. I think it might have been one or two episodes ago. Anyway,
I haven't
uh,
noticed. So,
fair enough. Fair enough. But I was a bit weirded out when I looked back at it later on, so I've adjusted the
mm,
camera so I'm a bit more centered now, I think.
sure.
So, first item I have is the rapid collapse of DEI. So
Yeah.
with Trump taking the presidency, I mean,
Hmm.
we've been seeing for a while, since at least late 2023, that woke was on the back foot and so forth. And I mean, there's a tombstone woke,
Hmm.
to 2024 or something is circulating. But nevertheless, I was surprised at how quickly Google and Disney and other large companies gave it up. And then, of course, I found out about the executive order, about the details of the executive order, and it appears that it would significantly impact their ability to get federal US contracts if they had a DEI program.
Right.
So I think that's what's behind it, which shows, of course, that yes, it was always about the money, and that yeah, now that the money's now that you need to reject DEI to get the money, they're quite happy to do so. They never really believed in it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fair point to make, though. I am wondering one thing, though, is that are we really learning a lesson here, or are they really learning the lesson? Because it's one thing to kind of adapt to political incentives, one way or the other. But I don't know if this Trump thing will last in decades and so forth. I'm very, very paranoid about the
I've
fact that, yeah,
been
people
wondering
aren't.
the same thing.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
What happens? No, go on.
no, go ahead.
I was saying, what happens in 4 years? It's an
Exactly.
executive order. Will the executive order be repealed? Uh,
Hmm.
my suspicion is it's stronger than that because the community has pushed back against woke in a fairly substantial way.
True.
But having said that, yeah, and it could potentially just be repealed, and they could be showing interest in it again in 4 years and reinstating programs. I suspect that won't happen for a variety of reasons. It's far from guaranteed that there'll be a Democratic president next time. And but even if there was, I suspect there's enough groundswell in the community at the moment that we probably won't see that. But it's not guaranteed.
Yeah, right. And the way that the Democrats are going, we might be waiting for a long time before something that they could kind of really get behind is going to show its face. Because one thing I'm seeing, which is a nothing burger, as far as I'm concerned, like this, I think there was one called Tim Ryan, I think, the the Democrat that's come out recently about the struggles of men and so forth. But as it turns out, it's more about, don't be toxic mask, don't do the whole toxic masculinity. How can we save them from Trump and I don't think he said this, but like the red pill stuff. I think that's kind of
Yeah,
the
and you
general attitude
and
he
you also
has.
get the tradcoms coming in as well, where you'd
Mm,
be pushing it back exactly to the other way. And that's
mhm.
right. Only men should have the draft and so forth. So yeah,
Exactly. Right.
yeah, and that's actually something too. There's potential for it to lurch back too far the other way as well and end up in a really tradcom society again. So that's something that has been concerning me for a few years, as we saw woke and feminism and so forth starting to slip, is that we could lurch too far the other way. So that's something we need to
Right.
be mindful of too, I think.
And there's a curious habit with certain tradcons, especially the female ones. They had this weird habit of starting to see the point in feminism. Like there was one
Mm,
that I won't name names
seen
right
that.
now, but there was one that was big time. trad wife kind of advocacy. Um, and then she had this moment where maybe protections from feminism were actually justified, kind of really going that gynocentric route. So so they have a weird way of kind of coming back to each other. Like, it's a fun game to
Yes.
play. Is it tradcon or feminist? In any
And
given quote.
both
So
sides of politics in the extreme are gynocentric. Exactly.
right,
For
yeah.
different reasons, perhaps, but yes, that's right. And they even see a synergy there.
Hmm.
And this is why what we're doing is still relevant because we're still talking about a new path forward, something that really hasn't been done before.
Right.
To view
Yeah.
the lives of men as just as valuable as the lives of women.
Hmm. Exactly. It's a meta problem because it's almost as if those tradcons don't think that they're doing anything wrong by saying that men should be in a servitude, in a servicing sort of a position. It's kind of it's like trying to explain music to a dog or something. Like it just doesn't kind of register with them.
And there's a fair number of men who recognize the problem, but are just resigned to it. And I don't think I was a little sad when I see that. So there are some who may argue it's a biological imperative or whatever all that stuff, but there are others who just say, "No, I recognize the problem. It's the way things are and the way that things have always been." Well, they don't have to be.
Mhm. Yeah, they don't, and if they don't have to be, then it's not so intrinsic.
Mm,
Right,
exactly.
right. We weren't meant for this. That's what we're trying to argue, but we're strangely getting pushback from some people who are within our men's issue sphere or formerly so.
Mm,
You know who you
yes.
are. But yeah.
But Peter Wright's done some really good work about showing the rise of gynocentrism in medieval Europe and so forth. And there's very clear indications of it not being certainly not being as prevalent as it was previously. And then it appeared in spades in medieval Europe. So as well as Peter Wright's work on gynocentrism.com, there's also purplemotes.net, I think it is, and that's another really good site as well as material, of course, we have on A Voice for Men.
Mhm.
Yeah. The material's out there. People just have to look at it. I mean, we get good viewership, but I still think that there's a lot of people who would really benefit by looking at the material we have.
Yeah, to be sure.
So the next thing I have is the 4B movement, and just in case this isn't clear, I have mentioned this in a previous episode, and you can be sure I'm going to be mentioning this regularly over the next few years because in November 2024, not long after the election, and just as a bit of a background for those who may not recall, 4B movement is a movement that's been going in South Korea for a number of years, and it refers to different things that women won't be doing anymore. No sex and heterosexual, no sex, no marriage. There's a few different things, and they all start with B in Korean. And the American women had picked up on this, particularly in November 2024, just after the election, and there were all sorts of newspaper articles and so forth talking about how this was American women were grabbing this and running with it. And it was a big thing. Crickets, absolute crickets now. And it died off very, very quickly. And I'm going to be mentioning it regularly because it is yet just another failed sex strike, among other things. But it's a marriage strike as well, allegedly. But it is a failed sex strike. And I, of course, have it on the list of failed sex strikes on Wiki for Men because it's quite a long list. So just anyway, I will be regularly mentioning this because it is so ridiculous the way they acted in November 2024 about how this was some huge movement. I've just tonight checked Google Trends, and yes, you can see a very sharp
Yeah.
discussion during November, and then it just dies.
Yeah, and
So
I'm
I
being
think
a little bit more diligent with my editing skills on this one. So by now you should be able to see the chart here.
excellent, great.
So
So yes. I will be, as I said, mentioning it regularly because one of the things that I do now, and one of the aims that I've had over the last few years in particular, is to not let them forget, not let them get away with it. Because what they do, what our opponents tend to do, is they make all sorts of wild claims. And the media love it. They pick up on it, and the media have tend to have a woke bias. So the mainstream media will pick up on it, and they'll talk about it like it's truth. And then 24-hour news cycle next week, next month, it's not being talked about. And so a lot of what I do now is actually just recording this stuff and making sure that they're not allowed to forget, because some of the things they say are absolutely outrageous, and I
Right.
absolutely think they should be called to account for, both
Hmm.
as
Right.
individuals and as groups.
Now, looking at the chart here, so is this looking at South Korea itself, or
That's worldwide. I did check the US as well, and it's virtually identical. And I also
mhm.
checked news articles, and the pattern is a little bit different, but not much. It's essentially the same trend that it's a spike in November, and then drops to virtually zero.
Yeah. So much for that, right? I
Indeed,
mean,
indeed.
mhm. Yeah, they just want to raise a fuss and then kind of forget they ever did so.
Exactly, yes.
It's a
And
minor form of non-accountability there.
having seen quite a few of these now, I was 100% sure this was exactly what was going to happen as soon as it happened. Yeah, sex strikes always fail, always fail. Yep. Uh, well, and by that I want to clarify when feminist groups are doing sex strikes and so forth, because I do want to clarify one thing. I've been arguing for many, many years that MGTOW is actually a sex strike. Some people argue that it is a marriage strike, and that is true, right? But it's actually a sex strike as well. So, and it's actually been very, very effective.
So yeah, contrary to the feminist kind of way, because
Yes.
we've got because men have things to do, I mean, and there's alternatives as well.
Mm.
So that's kind of
Yes.
the yeah, right. And I think the the reason it kind of works in this particular instance is that, well, for the most part, gynocentric society tends to mean that women have been trying to game and control and commodify this whole thing. So it's almost like saying, we'll wait a bit longer. We've already been waiting, some of us. So yeah. So we got other things to do and maybe even more fun things to do.
Well, and I think that that's I'm almost thinking it's a bit of a perfect storm, because feminists and others tried to do these things right when technology exploded onto the scene, and there were all sorts of other entertainments available that were really focused very much on what men wanted. That's not to say there aren't also things that interest women, but really, I think a lot of these things like gaming, online gaming, and gaming in
Yeah.
general, for example, this is something that really is overwhelmingly a behaviour of men, and it's something that can take up all of their free time, and they love it. And I've also been arguing recently too that friendships, men are probably more amenable to online friendships, I suspect. And a lot
Mhm.
of men, there's all this talk about, and there's data to show that there's been a decline in in friendships with men who are close by, male friendships, where they live near each
Interesting.
other, right? And some people have been trying to claim this is data to show the whole male loneliness thing, which I reject, by the way. And I noticed Paul Elam came out recently very
Mhm.
forcefully and made a clear point on that. And I just want to 100% endorse that. I think it's a complete beat up. I don't think men are, by and large, I don't think men are lonely at all at this point anymore. Certainly no more than in any other
Yeah.
era in history.
Right.
But what I suspect is happening is that many men have online friendships, and I think men in particular may be amenable to this. And I can imagine a lot of guys are gaming. Their friends are, people they know through their gaming, and they will talk to them about all sorts of things.
Mhm.
So I think most men are quite happy with this. And I have to say, even personally, this is the case. While I don't have nearly as many friends uh, near me anymore, but I engage with people, such as yourself and lots of other people online every day. We chat about things.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
do, yeah.
of mutual
And
interest. Yeah.
and one thing about the loneliness thing, men, by and large, tend to like their space. So they may be alone, but that's distinct from lonely, kind of pining
Yes, it is.
for the attention of
Com-
others or something. I'm
companionship.
not,
Yeah.
yes, I'm not saying that they're always, avoiding it or anything like that. If they have it, then they'll clearly enjoy it. But for the most part, they're not lonely in their aloneness. Yeah,
Yes, yes.
they're,
And that actually ties into the online aspect as well, because you can catch up with people, spend half an hour with them, and then you can turn it off and when you're done and go about whatever else you want to do. And I was going to say the other thing about male friendships is they tend to be oriented around tasks as well,
mhm,
and that of course fits in really well with this as well. You're looking at something like online gaming or various other things, or even interestingly enough, Wikipedia, which is very woke, is actually overwhelmingly male as well. And free and
mhm.
open source software development, also overwhelmingly male. And these are collaborative online activities as well. And I
Yeah,
think men are probably enjoying a lot of those sort of things. And it really ties into this idea that male friendships tend to be task focused. There's something or are tied together by a mutual interest. So whether it's Wikipedia, software development, online gaming, whatever, the men are getting in there, they're having fun, and they're chatting to their friends because they have something in common that they talk about.
right.
Yeah. And yes, so I was really pleased. I was really fantastic when Paul said that, because I've been thinking about this for a while. I hadn't talked much about it publicly, partly because my ideas were still evolving and I was still looking at the situation and gathering data. Paul came out and talked about this. I thought fantastic. So yeah, I thought, well, why don't I bring it up in this episode?
Sure. Well, more on the loneliness thing. Whenever it gets brought up, the sentiment behind it is that, well, we should fix it in a way that men get married again, and they should get you know, you know in a mindless way keep having more children
Yes,
or so forth. And as some of you may know, what I mean by how mindless is this is that just being reckless about it, because children are a responsibility. I think having a good plan for it is more than a fair thing to do. So just go out and have children is recklessness courtesy of the tradcons, as far as I'm concerned.
absolutely.
Yeah, right.
That may tie into my next topic. I don't know if we have anything else on 4B. Uh,
I mean, I don't think so, but I think that too was a big nothing burger, but we like talking about
yes,
burgers.
absolutely.
So
The media love it. The
yeah,
media love it, and the media also have a bias already, a woke bias. So it ties in nicely for them, and they can make all sorts of wild claims that just don't pan out. So the next topic I want to talk about, which ties in well, I think, is separatist feminism. I was actually thinking about this as a result of 4B, and kind of thinking maybe 4B is a bit like an attempt at separatist feminism again. Because for those who don't know, I have talked about in previous episodes, but separatist feminism, the heyday of it was really the 1970s and the 1980s, particularly in the United States and the UK, here in Australia as well, other Western countries. It was really, to a certain extent, I think mostly an Anglosphere phenomenon. I don't know if there was much of it in Europe, but essentially the idea was that feminists would leave society, what they regarded as patriarchal society, and they would set up in generally remote areas generally, and it would generally be an agrarian community. In fact, some of them eschewed the concept of machines and so forth, because they said that was all patriarchal and they were going right back to just basic agrarian work.
Mhm.
There were they a lot of these attempts failed. They didn't get any further. What they would initially do is they would rent a house in the suburbs, or even, and then they would live there, and they would dream about eventually establishing their commune in the country, and they would hire female tradespeople, or as we say in Australia, tradies, and that would be sort of as far as it would get. And then usually they get a bit old, and the commune would never happen. A few communes were created, but an interesting phenomenon actually occurred A lot of them had a lot of trouble attracting women, but interestingly enough, the a lot of the children who were born on them, and now bear in mind there had to be men involved somewhere along the line, right? Because we had children and alternatives weren't so available in the 1970s and the 1980s, so there was probably a bit of traditional sex going on. And anyway, the children, there was a real problem with because the boys often were required to leave by the age of 12, sometimes even earlier. And that was a real problem. A lot of the mothers weren't happy with that. Some of them left with their boys when that happened. Some of them, sometimes the boys would leave and live with the fathers. But another problem happened, which I think is particularly interesting. And that was that a lot of the girls who were, of course, entitled to stay on the communes, they wanted to leave. And almost all the girls who were born on these communes voluntarily left in their teenage years and moved back to regular society. They didn't want to live on these feminist women-only communes.
Mm.
So yeah, and there were quite a number of these around. As I said, like there were Amazon Acres was one of the better known ones here, but they all by the end of the 1980s they had all either ceased to exist or converted to more conventional societies and split up the land, subdivided the land into freehold, which is personal ownership, and become and open themselves up to men if they wanted to live there. So, but yeah, so it's interesting to that this was a real phenomenon of the 70s and 80s. By the way, the separatist feminists actually advocated for lesbian sex. They said that women
Mhm.
should cease engaging in heterosexual sex and should in fact couple up with women, which is interesting because that argues that sexual orientation is, of course, a choice, which is
Yes.
something that the feminist movement, by and large, would reject later on. But it does remind me a little bit of 4B in that yeah, they were explicitly rejecting sex. Uh, Truth is, the separatist feminists got a lot further than 4B did. 4B was a non-starter, but the separatist feminists did manage to sort of drag on for about 20 years. Yeah, mostly on life support, but yeah, before completely failing. But yeah, they actually made a better effort of it than the more recent 4B movement. So anyway, I just thought I just while I was thinking about 4B recently, it just reminded me of separatist feminism a little bit. So I thought interesting to do a bit of a comparison, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you're part of that sort of a commune in separatist feminism, you more so probably have to kind of own up to the fact that you were there because you had to be physically there and then leave it. But 4B, it's like a loose label, right? So you kind of claim, oh, I never was part of 4B, you know.
Yep, this
Right,
is
right.
true. This
So
is
there's a
true.
lack of more
Yeah.
lack of accountability. You're just after just spouting out nonsense, I suppose.
Exactly. It's probably maybe not a very close analogy, but it just reminded me of something.
Yeah,
The
yeah, yeah.
the number of people who were in the French Resistance significantly increased right after the end of World War II.
Hmm.
So when during World War II, when being in the French Resistance could get you killed, lots of people would deny being in the French Resistance, and the guys on the edge, maybe
Mm,
the police officer or the local official who was feeding
yeah,
information, oh no, no, I'm not in the Resistance
uh,
after the war. Yeah. Oh yes, I was in the Resistance. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
When it was
I get what
safe.
you mean.
Yes,
Right. Hmm.
exactly. So maybe with 4B it's the same. That's right. If it's if the tide turns against it, there'll be even less people. There'll be more people who would even be denying it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that yeah, with separatist feminism, as you say, they did have to make some level of commitment. I said a lot of them didn't get past be just renting a house in the suburbs and prioritizing female tradespeople. But there were a few that were created in various countries, and they did drag on for a little while. So yeah, there was at least some level of commitment there, but in the end, it was doomed.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yep. Which perhaps suggests that today's feminists are more about virtue signaling than feminists in the past, maybe.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense to me.
It does. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's all I had on separatist feminism, which led in from 4B. And the last one I wanted to mention is something I only learned about yesterday, actually. Uh, and I think it's only come up recently. So I think as a result of Musk's work, the US federal employee retirement system is entirely manual, apparently. which I found to be absolutely extraordinary. I don't know if you know much about this. It's only just come up recently, but apparently it's all done using paperwork, and there's a large vault or something underground where the paperwork is stored. And if they need
Right.
to search something, people have to physically go through the papers and search for them,
Hmm.
which I found to be absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah. It's
So
amusing,
that's
at to
it.
say the least.
Yeah, indeed, exactly. It also, of course, opens up risks there where, there could be, fires or floods or something because if it's underground, floods can occur. So it sounds like there's a real risk there too of important information being lost. Because there have been, in poorer countries, there have been a number of situations where critical documents held in papers were lost, like birth certificates and all sorts of things. So it's absolutely extraordinary, I think, that such important information is being held in physical form rather than being digitized.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
So anyway, I think we'll learn more about that in the next few weeks. But yeah, it was at a limestone mine in Pennsylvania, with 700 mine workers operating 250 feet underground. Gosh, extraordinary.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's all I had, except of course for my regular reference to Zoe McLellan, who is still outstanding,
Yeah.
still out there
So,
somewhere.
yep, I'm all ready. So,
Okay, no problem. As of February 2025, a warrant is outstanding for the arrest of Zoe McLellan in relation to charges of kidnapping, child stealing, and child custody deprivation. McLellan is a public figure who has appeared in numerous popular television shows, including Star Trek Voyager, JAG, NCIS New Orleans, and Designated Survivor. Her face is familiar to millions. It is extraordinary that she has evaded detection for so long. McLellan was reportedly residing in an apartment in River Ridge, Louisiana in April 2021 and may still be residing in the area. McLellan grew up in the area of Port Orchard, Washington State, and may have returned to the area. Some sources believe that McLellan has left the United States and is residing in Canada or Costa Rica. Prior to disappearing, McLellan was known to use the alias Sarah Chandler. Anyone with any relevant information should contact the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. Thank you.
guys, good later.
Talk to you in 2 weeks. Bye.
See you. Bye.